It's season 2 of Rabbit Holes with Aaron. We're going to be trying some new things. We've got enhanced Rabbit Holes with Aaron episodes on Patreon. And also, we're putting our podcast on skool.com, which is spelled Skool. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I'm Aaron, and today with me as my guest, I have Jenny White. She's a retired nurse. She is a brain tumor survivor, which is just sounds amazing to me. And she's now working on, she's a medical thriller author. And she has one book, her first book, she just released, and she's getting her second book ready also. So, yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Sarah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I always start off with this one question. What's something new and exciting in your life?
Well, I have to say, I'm grateful for being alive. Every day I wake up, I'm just thrilled that I'm here to spend another day and play.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you've come to that point, right? The point of it's so fun to be alive.
Well, a lot of people didn't wake up today, and that's one thing as a nurse, you realize the fragility of life. And as you said in the introduction, I was a brain tumor surgery survivor. And so I'm just blessed to still be here doing my thing and trying new things.
Yeah. I love that about life and about your stories. And I'm new to your story, but about your story, and that's the miracle that it is to be alive. The miracle that it is to breathe. Yeah, to be able to express yourself in books, to be able to walk, go for a walk, breathe air, hear the sounds of nature. I mean, I could go on, and I'm sure. What are some things that stand out to you that you're alive? Like when you do this, you're like, I'm so thankful I'm alive again.
Well, I probably should just tell you the story because I think if I share the story with you, you'll understand how profound it is that I'm doing what I'm doing. So I was a nurse and I retired after 33 years and I was having a great time in my retirement. I was, with my spouse and we were traveling the world and doing all the things that you want to do when you retire. And one day I was at home and I just wasn't feeling well. And the nurse inside of me sort of said, something's going on. You better go get checked. And I called 911, got myself to the hospital. And sure enough, I wasn't having a stroke, which was kind of what I was thinking, but I had a brain tumor that was going to kill me. And so that was like a full stop moment where you go, oh my goodness, now bad timing. And so, to make a long story short, I had surgery because it really was the only treatment option. But it was one of those surgeries where things could go very wrong. It was, real estate is everything in brain tumors, and mine was in a particularly bad spot. It was surrounding an artery in my brain that was being squeezed off. And as they did the surgery, the chances were I could die on the table. So after the surgery, I had an unexpected coma, and I was only in the coma for about 4 days. And of course, I didn't know it at the time. I found out afterwards. But the neurosurgeons were quite concerned because they didn't expect it. When I woke up, I was tied to the bed rails, which was not a fun experience, I have to tell you. I personally have tied people to bed rails as a nurse to keep them safe, and they had to do that for me. I apparently woke up and was quite combative, trying to rip out my staples in my head and trying to remove the equipment that was on me and my IVs and all of that kind of stuff. So they did what they had to do. As I was processing that, I noticed that there was a man at the end of the bed who was in street clothes. Well, it turned out he was my husband, but I had no clue he was my husband. Next, as I tried to talk to him and the nurses, I realized I wasn't making any sense. And the only way I knew that was because I thought I was talking and they were giving me those looks like, oh no, something's very wrong here. And they said to me, you're not making any sense. We can't understand you. Try and stay calm. Here's what's going to happen. And then lastly, as they were getting me up to walk, because I should have been up earlier, to avoid things like blood clots and all of those kinds of things, I realized I couldn't walk. So when you said in the intro there that, just being grateful for being able to, hear the birds and walk through the forest and all those kinds of things, they have a completely different meaning to me now. And because a lot of my memories are gone, I had to figure out a way to reinvent myself. And it was actually my speech therapist who was working with me extensively. He said to me, he said, try writing words down and we'll see if they make sense. And sure enough, they did. Like I'd write angry or frustrated or sad or tired or hungry. And it was what I meant to write. And so that was sort of my way of communicating with the world until we could kind of get my brain rewired and doing what it needed to do.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that story with us. And I can see what you're talking about. I can see
Yeah.
that every walk is something new for you.
Oh, it's precious. You have no idea. We so take for granted the things that we do every day, like just being independent, being able to brush your teeth on your own, to go to the bathroom on your own, to be able to feed yourself. Those are all things we take for granted. And when they're gone, it's like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah. It sounds like you've had to make a lot of adjustments and relearn a lot of things.
I have. I have. And, one of the reasons that I want to share my story with people is to share hope in reinvention. I mean, I've been at the bedside as a nurse. I've looked after people. I've held their hands as they've passed. And now I've
Yeah.
been the patient who's had the experience of, oh my goodness, the fear and the uncertainty and the vulnerability you feel. It really gives you a different lens of looking at life.
Yeah. Well, and I love that I can see your love for life and, and hear it in your voice. It's
Yeah.
vivacious, I guess, is the word that comes to mind. Like the celebration of life is something that you're still right in the middle of.
And I'm still recovering. I mean, I'm 2.5 years out from my brain surgery, and it took almost a good 6 months to get my walking back, to get my speech back. And then I had to start figuring out, okay, well, I can't remember the past, so the memories were gone. I couldn't remember my
Mm,
husband. I couldn't remember my kids' names. And so there's that real disconnect. And I had to sort of grieve the loss of all of those things. And then I had to make a choice. And my choice was, do I curl up in a ball and just go away and, let nature take its course? Or do I fight back and I figure out a way to go forward and reinvent myself? And so that's what I gave myself permission to do. I actually went back into being like a 5-year-old kid. As I was lying in bed watching TV and stuff, I was having trouble focusing, getting the stories in my head. And so I started thinking to myself, okay, well, if I were like 5 years old and just starting really out, getting excited about life and what was out there, what would a 5-year-old be doing? And then I realized that a 5-year-old would be making up adventures. They'd be creating playmates, imaginary playmates. They'd be playing with their pet. They'd be creating games. They'd be discovering things. So I thought, okay, well, since I can't remember much, I might as well just start at the beginning and start over. And so I allowed myself the opportunity to be 5 again in a 60-year-old body. And I just started dreaming about, well, if I could do anything, seeing as how I seem to have a clean slate here, what could I do? What would I love? What would I want to do? And that created some pathways for me to start asking questions and figuring out where I wanted to go. And that's where the writing came in. So after the speech therapist said to me, start writing things down, I started writing kids' stories down because that was kind of where I was at. And kids'
Yeah.
stories tend to be fun. They tend to be short. They tend to be pretty simplistic, really. And so I took the time and just started playing with kids' stories. And that helped rewire my brain. So that was kind of the impetus that got me into writing.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. That was your way back, like a beacon of light, like a lighthouse, that you could
It
follow
was.
the writing, to the point where now it's your main way of communicating and expressing yourself to the world in your books.
That's right. And I knew, I had no desire in my part one life before surgery to ever write. That just wasn't something that I did. I wrote academic papers, but that's not fiction. And so I knew I needed to learn the craft. So one of the things that I did for myself was I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I started exploring the internet for some online self-directed courses that would allow me to work around my rehab schedule as well as my fatigue, because that was one of the biggest problems that I have and still
Yeah.
have today is, all of a sudden I can just feel like I need to go lie down and sleep for 3 hours. That's kind of what happens. So it allowed me to do that. So as I started to learn the process of writing a book, it not only rewired my brain, but it empowered me. It made me feel like, okay, I can learn. My mind's still there. I can still do something new. Let's give it a try. And the whole medical thriller genre was something that I had always enjoyed reading in the past, like authors like Robin Cook, who is a physician. And I thought to myself, I've got like 3 decades plus worth of experience as a nurse. Why don't I find a way to express myself in that genre because I know it. And as I wrote, memories started getting triggered and they started coming back, thank heavens. And so I was able to take
Wow.
some of my past and incorporate it into the book. And I created my character, who is Abby Roberts. I always liked the name Abby, so I chose Abby Roberts, and I created her as a nurse, younger than I am today, so she'd be in her 30s, early 30s, working in an ICU, which was an environment that I loved and thrived in. And I gave her a brain injury, and I gave her
Hmm.
brain surgery. And I gave her some of the challenges that I had, like the fatigue, like the memory loss, like the frustrations and the anger of, not being able to be fully accountable. And I created a story around her as the main character and created the medical thriller. So, yeah, that's how it all started.
Wow. I love that. I love your story, and I really appreciate you sharing it with all of us. It really. I've been thinking a lot about many elements that you shared in your story. One of them is like I've been throwing around this idea that we are what we practice.
Hmm.
So many times. So you practice writing. You put a lot of hours. You've already got a book, and so you in to use a metaphor, like we put votes in a bucket for who we are or who we're going to be. And
Yeah.
you keep showing up, you keep putting those votes in the bucket. Well, I'm writing. How many votes in a bucket do I need to call myself a writer? And obviously you have a book out now, so you can very clearly call yourself a writer and nobody could disagree with you. What do you think about you are what you practice?
Well, I think that is very true. And I think one of the things that I want people to hear is to have an open mind. When I gave myself permission to dream or to try and figure out what I wanted to do, I didn't worry about what other people were going to think. I didn't worry about, whether it was going to make a difference in my life. I did it because I wanted to try and I wanted to have fun. And what I found was that once I had learned sort of the building blocks of how to create a fiction book, it actually wrote itself fairly quickly because, as you said, it's something that you know and it's something that you practice. And so I totally agree with you that as long as you have a will, and it has to be a strong will, no doubt, but as long as you have the will and plan and help, you can really do anything you want to do.
Right. There's nothing that's outside of the reach of what's possible. If you no task and no title, as long as you practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it, that you've already got published.
Yeah, I am a published author and I wouldn't have dreamed of that 2 years ago. But when it came time to, let the rubber hit the road, I was committed to learning. I was committed to getting feedback. I was committed to just trying. It really made me proud of myself for going from being comatose to 2.5 years later having basically two
Yeah.
books out there because sometimes people have limiting beliefs, right? They believe things like, I'm not smart enough, I can't do this, I don't have the money I need to do this, I'm too busy doing X, Y, and Z, I'm overwhelmed with stress. All of those things are limiting beliefs. Clearly, somebody has a plan for me here because number one, I'm alive. And number two, the nurse in me has not faded away. So my desire to help continues to this day. And so, how can I do that with my new normal? Well, my new normal is I'm now an author and an experienced patient and an experienced
Yeah.
healthcare provider. So that kind of gives me an interesting lens to share with others how I chose to move forward, hoping to inspire them that they too can make change. And if I can do it, they can do it.
I love it. And it's absolutely true. And your story is so inspirational. I'm so glad it's on the podcast and that people are going to be listening to it and hearing this story that these books come out of and this new lease on life. And I love the hope in the story. I love the hope. It's
Yeah.
almost contagious and it's almost pass aroundable. We can almost pass it to
Yeah.
somebody else and say, it doesn't matter what's happening in your life. You can just decide who you want to be and start even being an author or whatever you want to do.
Anything
You can
else?
turn the
Yeah.
corner and commit to it. Yeah. And I thought of a story for myself.
Yeah.
I always thought for myself that, yeah, I'll say being an author for when I break my back or something else and I'm disabled. And then that's the only thing I can do. That's when I'll do it. And I started
Yeah.
getting challenged by people to I kept hearing the idea of if responsible, mature adults put do writing. They use writing as a communication skill to pass their information out to more people, whether it is fiction, which I think is a wonderful vehicle for good concepts, healthy living, all kinds of things. There's so many, you can hide so many wonderful, good life-changing things inside of fiction, but then I also love self-help books, and they just get right to the point of, here's your problem, here's some creative ways to take a look at it. And whatever writing method a person chooses, like this message has been on my podcast over and over again, and that is, you need to be writing. You know,
For me, it was therapy. For me, I was able to take all of the emotions and the healing that I needed and put it into my character and allow my character to behave completely unreasonably without harming anyone because it's fiction.
yeah,
But I one of the other things that I did with my books is I added real life things that are happening in today's healthcare system and
mm,
added them to the book to give even more conflict. So, if we stop and we think about that for a minute, for example, COVID taught us so many things, right? It taught us that life is fragile. It taught us that healthcare workers go above and beyond when they're exhausted and, they have to be isolated and that kind of thing. So we have to consider how our healthcare systems work. We have shortages of staff. We have super tight budgets. We have limited supplies sometimes. We have limited medication availability sometimes. We have the costs of healthcare. So I sort of weave some of those themes into the book to make people, when they read the book, go, oh, yeah, never thought of that. Or, gee, when I have surgery, gee, I really hope my doctor hasn't had a fight with his spouse that day and is,
Yeah.
not up to snuff, or he's got, he maybe has a drug addiction or something like that that would affect the outcome of my surgery. So my real life surgery was wonderful. I mean, it came out as well as it could have come out under the circumstances. And my team that worked with me were fantastic. But I took the bad approach in the book and I kind of created scenarios and suggestions about things that could have gone wrong and put them in the book to create conflict and terror and anxiety and fear. So that kind of added to the medical thriller part of it.
That's smart. And, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Using fiction as a vehicle for real life issues and to get
Yeah.
people think about them. Get people maybe to solve them.
Yeah.
If you get enough people talking about that problem, then it will get solved. Somebody
Yeah,
will
exactly.
listen and somebody will make a change. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And it's all about
do you
creating
have, go
emotions
ahead.
with your reader, right? You want your reader to stop and go, "Oh, never thought of that," or "Wow, that could be a problem," or "Gee, I wonder if this happens." So, like you said, it's all part of creating questions and creating dialogue to get change to happen.
I'm curious, and I agree with you 100%. I just want to segue into maybe if we got other authors out there that are struggling or trying to get started, and you've already given them the biggest downhill push of all time with your story and with how you do it, but maybe some little tips and tricks or how you get yourself to a place where you write, maybe how you set up your environment or any other little tips
Yeah.
and tricks. Don't give it all away, but maybe just a few things that could help the rest of us.
Sure. So for me, this is what worked for me. I couldn't leave the house for a while because, well, first of all, I couldn't drive because they had me on anti-seizure medication because that was one of the possible side effects of my surgery. So I had to go like a whole year without driving. And so if I needed to go anywhere, my husband had to take me. So I was pretty much confined to the house. And we live on sort of like a farm area on the shores of Lake Erie. So I was able to get outside and all of that kind of thing. But I would get up in the morning, grab a coffee and come in and usually write until about noon. And that was sort of the best time for me because I was rested. I seemed more alert first thing in the morning. And then as I took my medications for the day, and there was a lot of them at the beginning, I'd have to rest. And I'd usually end up with like a 4 hour nap in the afternoon to get up for a few more hours and go back to sleep. So that was kind of what happened for me. And what I did is we took one of the spare bedrooms and we just created a mini office that's just for me so that I can do things like podcasts and just have quiet time. And usually the dog hangs out with me and we just kind of go with the flow. As I've been getting healthier, I'm spending more time at the desk, which is fine. But at the beginning, it was very short periods of time, but that's kind of how I did it. And in terms of creation of the book, because I took the courses, I had a good framework to use to craft sort of the meat and potatoes of the book. So, I kind of start with my characters and I'd figure out what I wanted them to be like or to do or what characteristics. And then I took things that I had seen in an ICU and I incorporated them into the storyline and just sort of started crafting the bones, for lack of a better word, of the story. Once I had that and I got feedback on that as to whether it works, whether it makes sense, whether it flowed, whether it followed all the rules, then I was able to just write basically chapter by chapter by chapter. And then it went through, I had a publisher, it went through about 9, 10 revisions, different editorial processes from looking at a developmental edit to a sentence structure edit to all of those kinds of things. So by the time it was done, it took pretty much 2 years to get it launched, like to get it published. And then the second one was easier because I'd been through the first process. So I pretty much knew what to do when and then have it reviewed. So that's kind of where I went.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. Yeah, so, and I want to go back to something you said earlier where you said the story just kind of comes out.
it
And
did for me. And maybe, yeah. So, I laugh that we kind of joke about it that when they were in there trying to get that tumor out, they were busy moving my brain around because of its location. And I think they might have gotten a piece of my brain to spark or to be ignited to want to write. And what I'm
hmm,
finding is that the writing part is kind of fun. I know people do struggle over writing, but for me, because it is something that is a part of me, basically, I was able to, have it flow fairly easily.
okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, I've noticed the same thing as I write as well, that I almost feel like it's cheating because I'll set a timer and I'll sit down and start typing, and I am so drawn into the story that I want to see what happens next. And I'm building
Yeah.
suspense within myself, and I can't wait to write about that character again to see what they're going to do next. Do you feel that way too?
Exactly. Yeah, it is exactly that. And when you're writing fiction, you can, I mean, obviously it's make believe, right? So you can make anything happen that you want. You just have to make it believable. So just like when I was reinventing my life, I was saying, okay, so what's next? What if? And what about that? And maybe I should try that. And if that doesn't work, maybe I should go over here. So it's kind of been an interesting experience having a blank slate and being able to take a life that was lived that you can sort of remember, but not really, and then put yourself in a position where you're just trying something completely out of your comfort zone, completely out of the norm of what you would have done in the first life, and just create this new experience, for lack of a better word. It's, my poor spouse, he's looking at me like, who are you and what are you doing? And, we've had to reinvent our marriage in terms of we're back to square one. We're dating. We're husband and wife, we're living in the same house, but it's more like roommates, and we're having to get to know each other again because he has 30 years of experience and memories of our life together, and I have very, very few. So it's like we're strangers trying to figure it all out again. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with me. And I think most married couples would probably, well, I know they probably pay a lot of money for marriage counseling to try and get back to a place where they're just figuring each other out again in the way that you're
Yeah.
describing.
Yeah.
Reimagining, reinventing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you do, right? Like, I can't go back and he can't go forward. So we're kind of in this quandary of, okay, let's just start over. Let's start dating. Let's go out for dinner. Let's start talking like we're perfect strangers to each other. And just, it does prompt some memories to come back, which is what I had hoped it would do. And it is different. It's just I don't even know how to describe it really. It's just so concerning. It's so challenging to know you've been married to somebody for 20 years, but the ins and outs of that marriage are gone for you. And so it's like, what's next?
Yeah, I can. Well, and you're right. I mean, I can really only imagine. But I like something you said about your comfort zone. And I can only imagine that everything sat outside of your comfort zone when you woke up, from the coma. And you had to figure out who you wanted to be, what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember lying in the hospital bed, looking at the ceiling because there wasn't anything else to do. And I remember thinking, Houston, we have a problem here. Like, I'm gonna have to figure something out. I was annoyed that I felt so differently. I was grateful to be alive, but at the same time I was thinking, okay, yeah, well, now what? Right? And so you hope things happen. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You can only go forward. You can't go back.
Yeah. Well, and I think that could apply to any part of life. Really, you never do get to go back. You always got to go forward. And they say that's the process of grief too. You never learn to live without the person you lost, or maybe the pet you lost, or whatever you lost. All you can do is move through it, and you move forward differently. And
Yeah.
that's really amplified your situation here. It's a different story, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that I came to realize that really I'm a spiritual being. I was always a woman of faith anyway, but this kind of rocks you to your core, and you kind of realize that your body is really just a package, for lack of a better word. My package had a rip in it and it had to be fixed, so I had surgery to have the package repaired. But my spirit didn't die. My spirit of wanting to give back, to continue to help people heal was still intact. And so I acknowledge that. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to keep going forward, to continue to find ways to help people heal myself, but also heal others. So one of the reasons that it's important to me to share the book is because you will see me in that character. You will see my healing in that process in the book. And so the book
Mm.
is called The Triggering Scent, and it's available everywhere. And I hope one day when I grow up, I'll be a best selling medical thriller author. Time will tell on that one.
Well, I don't know how I feel about you growing up, because I still have not completely grown up, and I'm resisting it, with every fiber of my being. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It reminds me, and this is going to be a rabbit hole, way out left field, but the symptomology that we're talking about, like your personality shift, and though your heart and your core stayed the same, that really aligns a lot with like TBI injuries that so many of our
Yeah.
veterans throughout time have endured. And they go away to combat and they come back, and my wife works with veteran spouses, and they come back and they're a completely different person, different personality. They
Yeah.
were outgoing and happy and fun, and now they're broody,
Yeah.
dark, and a little
And
bit
traumatized.
miserable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Until you've lived through a trauma that severe, it's really impossible for other people to understand it. And one of the things that I think it's really important that people know is that, I look not too bad. Like I look okay. I don't look like a brain tumor surgery survivor. I just look normal. But what they need to understand is that I still have anxiety. I still have a bit of depression off and on. I still have extensive fatigue that happens. And so when you're looking at myself or a veteran who's had a different experience but equally traumatized, they may look fine, but inside they're falling apart. And for me, writing was my medicine. For others, it's going to be something else. And we just need to be caring as a society to understand that if you look okay, it doesn't mean you are okay. And, unless you've had the trauma or maybe a disease of the brain like dementia or schizophrenia or mental health issues, you just can't be judged. It's just not fair to judge people based on that. So we need to be kinder to people, I think, in this world.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Everything I've ever said in this podcast is be more patient, listen better to people, give them a chance,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I think that really applies here. And and to share a little bit of my story, like I have multiple sclerosis, and it attacks a certain part of my brain, which messes with
Yeah.
my balance. And so, my balance gets a little bit worse over time as I go, but you never know what the person is carrying. But here's what I love about your story, and here's what I love about my story, and that we have in common, and that is that you can't tell by looking, but man, hopefully you're still encouraged by the fact that I have less, and you have less faculties in some way, or disabled in some ways. But look what you're doing. You're writing books. But look what you're doing. You're disciplined, and you're focused on expressing a story that's going to help.
Yeah. And, by talking with people and sharing and comparing notes, for lack of a better word, on strategies to use, I mean, different things work for different people. But if I say something and it helps one person, fabulous. Fabulous. That makes my heart sing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the number that matters, isn't it? I mean, one is, it's so looked down upon, but it is where everything happens. It's multiplicative because one is
Yes.
never one person. One person is always, God saw fit to not just drop us on a planet with no life by ourselves, figure it out. No, he dropped us into a network of people.
Yeah.
Geographically, a family as well, you know, raised with groups of people. There's always others around. There's always the ability to connect with others and find support. And one person is always connected to that vast network. So, what do you think about that?
I totally agree. I think we're very much connected to each other as human beings on this planet. We're having a human experience. We need to be working side by side and recognize that we are all the same in many ways. We may look different, the package is different, but the spirit's the same. So, if we could get past some of the limiting beliefs that we have in our society and about judging people and looking at people and putting them in categories. I mean, it's just beyond my understanding at this point as to why that still happens. But it's the way
Mm,
society has created these belief systems, and we've got to challenge them. We really do.
I like that. Yeah, we all have our own individual identity that can move to support and serve others, that can communicate. One of the highest things I think we can do is listen and understand another person. As we're listening and understanding each other on this podcast, as you listen to people, it makes them your ally. It takes them from being your enemy to being your ally, and you're all on the same side. And
That's
that's
really
kind
well
of, I'm
said.
the champion. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I got it from a negotiation book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. But yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Wow, we've hit a lot of good points here.
We
Well, did you have
did.
any questions for me?
Gosh, really off
No
the top of
pressure.
my head, no pressure.
Okay. No
Yeah.
pressure. I didn't know. I was just checking in with you. You don't have to have any.
No, no, I'm good. I'm good, and I
Okay.
appreciate you letting me tell my story.
I appreciate you telling your story. It's an amazing story. It motivates and it encourages and it's inspirational. I mean, and I feel the same way as you. I'd love to have you back on the show, maybe in next season. And she's like, well, just wait and see what the numbers are and how people like it or not. She was saying that for my benefit. And I said, I don't pick my podcast guests based on numbers. I pick them on how interesting and how insightful the conversation is. And of
Yeah.
course, this is right up there. This conversation we're having, solving all the world's problems. I'm not trying to make too much light, but also bring a little levity on following. We're branching and multiplicative. It's organic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for lending me some of your time today and sharing your story with me. For those who are listening, there's going to be a link to her book in the comments below. So please take a look at that, read it, give her feedback, give her reviews,
Yeah.
And so thank you for being with me today, Jenny.
My pleasure, Aaron. Thanks so much.
Is there any other shout outs you might want to do before we close out?
I probably should tell you my website. So I do have a website. It's www.jennywhite.ca because I'm out of Canada. And
Okay.
if anybody is looking for a keynote speaker, I'd be interested as well. I do have a speaker website, which is www.speakerjennywhite.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to check those out myself. And
Okay.
I'm really curious about your book, so I'm going to have to check that out too. I'm sure my wife will
Yeah,
read it.
please
She
do. I hope
loves.
you like it. Great.
Well, I'll let you know.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure I will, but I will, I'll give you feedback. I mean, this is the barter system, right?
That's right. It's how you learn.
But also, go ahead. That's how you
Yeah, I
learn.
said
Yeah,
it's how you
exactly.
learn. Yeah.
Well, and I want to thank my audience and my listeners for tuning in and checking this out. And I just ask you to support Jenny and what she's doing in one way or the other. She gave us a lot of options, and we'll talk to y'all next week.